All right, in this lesson, we're going to be looking at adding, simplifying, and adding rational expressions. So first of all, we need to understand what a rational expression is. It's any expression with a variable or variables in the numerator or denominator. If there are variables in the denominator, you must find excluded values that cause the denominator to equal 0, since you cannot divide by 0. Here are the steps to simplifying and adding rational expressions. So first thing you want to do is factor the numerator and denominator. Once you've factored, you want to determine the lowest common denominator. And then you will just add the numerators, keep the denominator, and then if you have a variable in the denominator, you need to determine which values should be excluded. So in this example, we want to state the excluded values. So the first thing we want to do is factor that denominator. When we factor the denominator, we get n squared minus 3n minus 18. First thing we did was factor out the GCF, which was 2. And that left us with n squared minus 3n minus 18, which can also be factored. When we factor it, we get n in the front of both parentheses. And the two numbers that we multiply to get 18 and subtract to get 3 are 6 and 3. The bigger of those two numbers should be negative, the same as the linear term. The other should be positive. So now we can determine what should be excluded. The values of n that would make the denominator 0. So you're going to set each one of those factors equal to 0 to determine the excluded values. When we set n minus 6 equal to 0, we get n equals 6. And when we set n plus 3 equal to 0, we get n equals negative 3. So those are the two values that n cannot be. Keep in mind on GoFormative, so that I don't have to list all the different variations of the answer, I want you to put your answers, list your excluded values from least to greatest, separated by commas. All right, so in GoFormative, you would type negative 3, comma 6. All right, next example, we want to first change this division problem into a multiplication problem by taking the reciprocal of the second fraction. So now we have a multiplication problem. We changed the division to multiplication and took the reciprocal of the divisor, what we're dividing by. And now we're going to determine what x cannot be. So x cannot be, the denominators are 3, the factors in the denominator are 3, x minus 14, and x plus 5. So when we set x minus 14 equal to 0, we get 14. And when we set x plus 5 equal to 0, we get x equals negative 5. Again, list them in order from least to greatest. Next, we want to determine what the lowest common denominator is. The lowest common denominator is the lowest common multiple of the factors in the denominator. So one of the factors in the denominator is a 3. Another factor in the denominator is an m. And then the last factor in the denominator is m minus 6 to the first power. That is our lowest common denominator. All right, now we want to simplify this expression. And first thing we're going to do is cancel. We're going to simplify each one of the fractions before we add the two terms. So we can cancel the 4 and the 6. The x's cancel in that second fraction. 2 goes into 4 twice. 2 goes into 6 3 times. And then in that second fraction, 4 goes into 8 twice. 4 goes into 4 one time. All right, so that leaves us with 2x over 3 plus 2 over y squared. And we need to now determine what the lowest common denominator is. The lowest common denominator is going to be 3y squared. All right, so now that we've determined what the lowest common denominator is, we just ask ourselves, what do we have to multiply each denominator by to get the LCD? And for the first fraction, we need to multiply it by y squared. So we're going to multiply the numerator by the same thing, y squared. For the second denominator, in order to get the LCD, we have to multiply that second denominator by 3 to get the LCD. So we have to do the same thing to the numerator. Multiply it by 3. When we multiply 2x times y squared, we get 2xy squared. When we multiply 2 times 3, we get 6. And then that all goes over the lowest common denominator. Again, we have a variable in the denominator, so we should have an excluded value or values. When we set that y squared equal to 0, we get y cannot equal 0. All right, next example, we want to add these two rational terms, these two fractions. All right, so the first thing we want to do is determine the GCF of that second denominator. The GCF is 5, so we can factor out a 5. And now we want to determine what the LCD is. The LCD is going to be 5 times x plus 4 times x minus 5. Those are the three factors that we have in our denominators. So again, ask yourself, what do you have to multiply the first denominator by to get the LCD? And we have to multiply it by 5 times x minus 5. So we're going to multiply that first numerator by that. The second denominator, we need to multiply by x plus 4 to get the LCD. So we have to multiply that numerator by x plus 4. And all that goes over the lowest common denominator. When we multiply 2 times 5 times x minus 5, we get 10x minus 50. When we multiply x plus 6 times x plus 4, we get x squared plus 10x plus 24. Again, all that goes over the lowest common denominator. Combine the like terms in the numerator, and we get x squared plus 20x minus 26 over the LCD. And lastly, state what x cannot be. X cannot equal 5 or negative 4. So negative 4, comma 5 is what you should have in Go Formative. 6, factor the denominators. The only thing we can factor is that first denominator. We can factor out a GCF of 4. When we factor out the 4, we're left with b minus 5. And then determine what the LCD is. The LCD is 4 times b minus 5 times 3 plus 5. And then again, ask yourself, what do you have to multiply the denominator by to get the LCD? And that first denominator, we need to multiply by 3b plus 5. So we're going to multiply the 3 by 3b plus 5. Same thing for the second denominator. In order to get the LCD, we have to multiply the second denominator by 4 times b minus 5. All that goes over the lowest common denominator. When we multiply 3 times 3b plus 5, we get 9b plus 15. When we multiply negative 6b times 4 times b minus 5, we get negative 24b squared plus 120b. All of that over the LCD. Combine the like terms and put the terms in descending exponential order. First term is going to be negative 24b squared in the numerator plus 129b plus 15. All that over the lowest common denominator. B cannot equal 5 or negative 15 over 3, which is negative 5. So negative 5 or positive 5. Those two values will cause the denominator to be 0. And the last example, we need to factor that second denominator. First thing we want to pull out is the GCF, which is 2n. When we pull out that 2n, we're left with n squared minus n minus 30, which can also be factored. n squared minus n minus 30. We should have n's in the front of both parentheses. And then we're looking for two numbers that we multiply to give us 30, subtract to give us 1. Those two numbers are 6 and 5. The bigger number should have the same sign as that middle linear term. So the bigger number is 6, so 6 should be negative, and the 5 should be positive. LCD is 3 times 2 times n minus 6 times n plus 5. So 3 times 2 is 6, and then n minus 6, n plus 5. So we have to multiply that first denominator by 2n, n minus 6, n plus 5 to get the LCD. So we have to multiply the numerator by that same thing. Second denominator, we just need to multiply the second denominator by 3 to get the LCD. So we're going to multiply the numerator by the same thing, all that over the LCD. And then simplify, when we multiply 5 times 2n times n minus 6 times n plus 5, we get 10n times n squared minus n minus 30 minus 3n plus 15, all that over the LCD. When we distribute the 10n, we get 10n cubed minus 10n squared minus 300n minus 33n plus 15, and all that over the LCD. Once we combine the like terms, we get the following, and we need to state what n cannot equal. N, when we set 6n equal to 0, we get n cannot be 0. When we set n minus 6 equal to 0, we get n cannot equal 6. When we set n plus 5 equal to 0, we get n cannot equal negative 5. All right, so we need to add a 0 in there.